Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Dedicated Hearts made Fullmetal in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 16, Overcoming Fear. Damn it. I'm going to join the Scouts. Jean yelled as the tears fell from his eyes. Armin, Connie, and Annie awaited their turn to be inspected by the military police. Yesterday night someone had killed the captured Titans, and now the 104th Cadet Corps were being investigated for a possible suspect, all of this just hours before they had to choose which branch of the military they'd join, and it seemed everyone, except Armin and Jean, were having second thoughts about joining the Scout Regiment. Connie was now contemplating whether he should join the military police. Being in the top 10 of their class meant they had options, like getting as far away from the Titans as possible. Annie had told them that she was going to join the military police to save herself, and seemed to question Armin on whether he was willing to lay down his life. To Armin it seemed as though she wanted to talk him out of it. "Seems like you care more than you let on, Annie," smiled Armin. "I don't, I just want to live," she said simply. "The only person I'm looking out for dash. Mina Carolina, Trainee Squad 34, sir," Mina announced to the military police. Annie looked at Mina. Throughout the 3 years of training camp, Annie had tried to be as distant as she could from everyone else, ultimately knowing that these were the people who she had placed in danger and who she might have to kill if she wanted to complete the mission. But Mina, not matter what Annie did, no matter how cold she was to her, Mina would always try to make the effort to talk to her, make the effort to involve her in other activities, make the effort to get to know her, make the effort to be her friend, and in the end Annie considered her a friend. Annie felt a wave of dread wash over her as the idea that she might have to kill Mina if she got in their way set in. "Only looking out for who?" asked Armin, bring Annie out of her thoughts. "Never mind," she responded, looking at the table. "Just know this, Armin, they will tell you to sacrifice yourself and die for their goals, and you must be willing to say no, willing to put yourself first. Don't resign yourself to being fodder for their ambitions." Armin listened carefully to Annie as she gave him her words of wisdom, all the while staring at her ODM gear. The ceremony was held in a fenced-off courtyard with a large grand-looking stage at the end. Armin, Annie, Mina, Sasha, and Connie leaned up against the wall of one of the buildings around the courtyard. The sun was setting, and with it the remaining time they had to make up their minds. Connie and Sasha were leaning towards joining the military police, and Mina wasn't sure what to do. "So Mina," said Armin, "you still planning on joining the Scouts?" "I don't know," she confessed. "I can't join the garrison, not after Captain Woolman almost killed us. The thought of having to take orders from someone like him, but there's also the chance that we might be part of that expedition 2 months from now, and I don't know if I can face the Titans again. I almost died if it wasn't for Alphonse and Ed saving me, but if what Commander Irwin said about Karen's being next. I don't know if I can live with myself if I just sat there on the walls while others go out to stop a Titan attack on my home district. I guess I'll find out what I want during the ceremony." "Mina," said Annie, catching her attention, "you should ask yourself, would you prefer to do something that is best for you or for others? How you answer that is how you will choose between the garrison and Scouts." Annie then shuffles closer to Mina. "But in my opinion, you shouldn't place yourself in harm's way. You could get a position in the garrison in Karen's, that way you'll stay close to your family." Mina gave Annie a soft small smile. "Thanks for the advice, Annie, and thank you for caring." She tenderly took Annie's hand and held it softly as if to compensate for a hug. "I hope you do well in the military police, and I know with your skill, you'll be a captain there in no time." "Heard you killed a Titan," said Armin. "Yeah, it was only one though," responded Mina. "I only managed to kill it because it didn't notice me. Still, it's one more than me and Sasha, and we're meant to be top 10. Connie joked, trying to distract him from their impending choice. Jean walked up to the group of 4. "Jean, you're really set on joining the Scouts?" asked Armin. Mina gasped in shock. "You're joining the Scouts? I thought you always wanted to be a MP." "I did," he said simply, "but things change, everything has changed." "Aren't you scared?" asked Sasha. "Of course I'm afraid, but some things have to be done," he said slightly aggressively. "Look, I'm not going to pressure you guys into following me like a certain suicidal idiot. Being asked to risk your life is something you can't take lightly. Aaron's been a scout for a while now," observed Connie. "So have Ed and Alphonse, and those two weren't even cadets," added Armin. "Cadets!" yelled one of the instructors. "Form up, head to the platform, it's time to make your choice. No one told me to risk my life, and this isn't something you take lightly. If you're going to make a choice like this, it has to be your decision 100%, so believe me when I say that this decision is mine through and through. He finished. When did Jean decide to join the Scouts? Asked Mina. During the funeral pyre, you, Armin and Mikasa got sent to the trial the day we cleaned up Trost. He found Marco dead and then, he just decided he wanted to join the Scouts, replied Connie. He thought back to that day, the smell of burning flesh and the sight of all his former comrades turning into ash still stuck with him. I'm sorry I missed it, said Mina apologetically. She looked at the ground feeling guilty for missing the funeral of her friends. Milius, Nick, Thomas. Marco. It wasn't your fault, comforted Connie. Evening had now fallen upon them when Erwin Smith took to the stage in front of the 104th Cadet Corps with the ambition of trying to convince them to join the Scout Regiment and join him on the front lines of the war against the Titans. A line of torches lined up on both sides of the courtyard and the stage illuminated the area in a dim sunset glow. Good evening, he said. I'm Erwin Smith, commander of the Survey Corps, or better known as the Scout Regiment. Today you will have to choose which branch of the military you wish to belong to. Let's cut to the chase. The Scouts need you, we need all the able bodies we can get. After the recent Titan attack on Trost, you've all experienced firsthand the horrors of which the Titans are capable of, and what you had faced is no different than what an average expedition is like for us. I'm sure that you are now aware of what your limitations are as well as your own fear of the Titans. Many good lives were lost at the battle. However, the reclamation of Trost brought humanity closer to victory than it had in the 5 years after Wall Maria fell and in the 100 years since we were forced into these walls. By now you are all aware of the existence of Eren Yeager and the Elric brothers. It is through their combined efforts that the breach in Trost district has been sealed, and it is my understanding that many of you here tonight because of their involvement in the battle. Even after being put through hell, the 3 of them have joined our ranks and are determined to help end the Titans' reign of terror over humanity. But more than this, Eren Yeager has presented us with an opportunity to discover the truth of their origins. The answer to the Titans lies within his basement back in Shiganshina. There was a collective gasp from the crowd, and suddenly almost everyone erupted into whispers. Erwin stood silent for a few seconds to allow this revelation to sink in. If we can reach his basement, then I believe we can find the clues which can help us end a century of Titan domination over humanity, he stated confidently. His basement? Questioned Reiner. Mina, who was standing next to Annie, looked over to him. Both he and Berthold looked shocked. Why would he just announce something like that? Thought Armin, unless he's planning something. However, before we can reach his basement we must first retake Wall Maria. The Elrics have informed me that using their alchemic abilities they can quickly construct a gate and entrance in Trost once more. Petra and Mike entered the stage and together held out a large map for all the cadets to see, meaning that the path carved out by the Scout Regiment's battalions over the last 5 years is still going to be put into use to mobilize a larger force to retake Wall Maria. Mike and Petra then left the center of the stage, leaving Erwin alone to talk to the cadets. Over the course of those 5 years the Scout Regiment has lost 60% of its soldiers in our efforts to lay out the groundwork for the wall recovery. Their deaths were not in vain. There were more gasps and chattering among the cadets at the causality rate. However, there is another urgent matter to attend to. With the Titan invasion of Trost pushed back, we can suspect that the enemy may yet attack a closer district. We predict that Karen's will be the likely next place for the Titans to strike, which is why in 2 months' time we will launch a recon expedition from Karen's to monitor Titan movements in the area as well as prevent any possible attack. Those who sign up will be expected to join the expedition, and I predict that a third of you who do will die during the coming expedition, and as time progresses most will have died in the expeditions to come. But those who survive will be the most capable and experienced soldiers alive and will no doubt play a role in the decisive battle to retake Wall Maria in the not-so-distant future. Erwin closed his eyes for a second and inhaled deeply. Now, the situation before us dire and the road ahead will be fraught with difficulty and will require you to make great sacrifices which will all too likely include your very life. But there is hope. Hope that retaking Wall Maria is now within our very grasps. Hope to end Titan domination over us, and hope for humanity to once more stand tall in this world. Those who are willing to put their lives on the line stay here, but first ask yourself, are you willing to give your heart for that hope? Give your soul to the cause? Give up your life for humanity. He finished, becoming more intense at the last word. The cadets began to look at each other wearily. wondering whether they could really pay such a steep price. That is all, those wishing to join other regiments are dismissed. Irwin stated, his tone now far more calmer. The other scouts looked at each other as the commander finished his speech. It wasn't an easy speech to listen to with all the hard truths which some of them might have liked if those weren't mentioned, but the part about hope for the future should surely reel in a good chunk of cadets. One by one the cadets began to leave the formation and make their way out of the courtyard, leaving to join the garrison regiment. Then it became groups of them. Many of them couldn't stomach the idea of dying, and that's what would likely happen if they were to join the scouts. Mikasa and Armin both watched as everyone around them walked away. Connie and Sasha were frozen in place, fighting an internal war over what they wanted to do. Jean had one leg to the side and another planted into the very ground. It seemed as though he was now having second thoughts. Reiner and Berthold stood on the spot. Berthold turned his head to the side to see Annie walk away. Mina clenched her fist, her whole body tensed up as if fight the urge to walk away with Annie. As Annie walked away with the other cadets, she stopped and turned her head to catch Berthold looking at her, who then quickly looked away from her, and Mina still standing there on the spot. Annie let out a sigh and continued walking. When Mina was talking about which regiment to join, it was obvious to Annie who she'd end up joining even if it wasn't for Mina. Within a minute those who wanted to leave and join the garrison, or in Annie's case the military police, were now gone, leaving the rest of the cadets who wished to join the scouts still in the courtyard. Irwin scanned the cadets, their grim expression and the tear-stained cheeks. No doubt they were terrified at the thought of dying, yet here they stood anyway in the face of seemingly difficult odds. "I ask you, if you were ordered to die, would you do it?" he asked simply. "We don't want to die, sir," yelled Jean. Irwin gave them a sly smile. "Of course, let us hope that you don't then," he replied, his expression quickly changed, becoming more stern. "To you who stayed? You now proudly don the wings of freedom, and I welcome you into our ranks. This is a genuine salute, soldiers. Dedicate your heart," he declared, saluting them, slamming his clenched fist on the left side of his chest. The rest of the cadets followed along, giving a salute back to Irwin. "Yes, sir." Armin looked around to see who was left. To his surprise he saw most of his friends remaining. He'd thought they'd join the military police along with Annie. Everyone," he said weakly. Jean looked to the ground, feeling like a complete fool, joined the scouts. "I'm a real fucking idiot," he muttered. "I hate this," muttered Sasha as a seemingly never-ending stream tears ran down her cheeks. "I'm scared, I just want to go back to my village." Connie softly laughed to himself at his own bravery and stupidity. "I just don't give a fuck anymore," as cold sweat ran down his forehead. Reiner stood in his place with a fierce look of determination on his face, while Berthold still kept looking over his shoulder at Annie, who had left already. Krista stood there shaking, struggling to stop herself from breaking down on the spot. Like Sasha, she too was crying. "If you're gonna keep crying, then don't stay," said Amir, who was standing next to her. Mina stood her ground against her fear in silence, still tensing up to stop herself from shaking, her eyes shut tightly as she listened to others weep and the commander speak. "I see 43 members of the 104th Scout Regiment who have given the salute," said Irwin. "You've stood against your fears, and for that each one of you have earned nothing less than my admiration." Chapter 17, Learning. "All right, Elrics," said Levi, handing them a drawing of a large contraptions with details of the inner mechanism. It looked to be made up of 3 slanted pillars with long wires attached to it that can be pulled up by a crank. "Think you can make this?" asked Levi as he placed the wires on the ground. "Yeah, I can do it," replied Ed. He, Alphonse, Levi and Aaron were in an open space just outside the castle. Ed quickly studied the drawing and details. He clapped his hands together and placed them on the ground, transmuting the large contraption as shown in the drawing before them. "Huh, guess that saves us a trip to the training corps ground," remarked Levi, a little surprised that it worked. "All right, Edward, you're up first. Attach the wires to the latches on your belt. The aim here is to stay upright in the air for at least 10 seconds. If you boys master this, then we move on to the second part of the training. If not, then you're fucked, and that means in extension we're fucked. So don't fuck this up, that's an order. Have a loose stance, but balanced," Aaron advised, "but also make sure your equipment isn't broken or you'll just lose balance and hit your head," he said, rubbing his head as the painful memories of training camp returned to him. "All right, let's do this," said Ed. Levi then began to turn the wheel, which pulled Ed into the air. "Balance," It's all about balance. Once he was lifted off the ground he began to wobble as he shifted his weight around, however he quickly managed to gain his composure, spreading his legs and arms to his side. He was intensely focused on every movement of the swing, counteracting any sharp movement in any direction, but neither Ed nor Alphonse were strangers to being suspended from the ground. The fighting style they were taught had incorporated punches and kicks in the midair. 3, 2, 1. Counted Levi. All right, you passed. He then turned the wheel and lowered Ed to the ground. Yeah, proclaimed Ed, launching his fists into the air. Way to go, brother, congratulated Alphonse. All right, Ed, cheered Aaron. Hey, interrupted Levi, celebrate when you can work the ODM gear. Alphonse, you're up next. What's the point of this again? Asked Alphonse as he stood on a stone platform with his ODM gear attached to him facing a large drop off the highest tower in the castle, his belt attached to a bungee cord which was very tightly tied to holes in the stone platform. At first he and Ed thought that it must have been time for them to try out the real thing, instead it looked as though there was more training to go through. Simple, ODM gear requires its users to be able to keep calm under pressure while in the air. This is so you can get used to falling and being in the air at great heights, simulating what happens on a daily basis for ODM users, explained Levi, standing behind Alphonse. Oh, okay, said Alphonse as he looked down nervously. Just give me a second dash. He felt the hard shove on his back as Levi kicked him off the platform. All right, pull him back up, said Levi to Eld and Gunther. They then pulled at the wire, slowly dragging Alphonse up onto the platform. He grabbed the edge and pulled himself up, crawling onto platform on all fours. Breathing frantically he then slowly go up to his feet to face Levi again, said Levi as he kicked Alphonse off the platform a second time. After the fourth time, Alphonse then quickly got onto his feet on the platform and braced himself for being kicked off again. You're done, Alphonse, said Levi. Really? Said Alphonse, pleased that it was over. No, responded Levi as he kicked Alphonse off the edge for a fifth time, only this time Alphonse was pretty much used to the feeling of falling. He didn't make a sound during his descent. Now you're done, yelled Levi. Before I teach you how to operate the ODM gear you're gonna learn how to maintain your gear, said Levi, holding up a piece of the ODM gear from the table in front of him. It looked like a small metal wine barrel and had a small exhaust pipe. This is a vertical maneuvering device that is attached to the metal plates just above your asses and is connected to the belt with the hooks. He then picked up the handle. This is the operating device. You point them in the direction you want to fire the steel wire hooks. These get stored in the pockets just below your smelly armpits. He lowered the handle to the table and picked up the large metal rectangle container with the gas canister attached to it. This is your scarab with a gas canister on top. You hold your blades in here. You can hold 4 in each. He then lowered the scarab onto the table and picked up one of the large blades. This is a flesh paring sword. Attach them to the operating device. Use them to slice the nape of the Titan. He then placed the blade down and picked up a book, and this is a manual on how to disassemble and reassemble your ODM gear along with instructions for maintenance. You are to learn your gear inside and out for the actual training in over a week's time. If you don't, then you better hope an equipment failure is your cause of death, because if I find out, it's going to be a lot more painful. Levi then left the room, leaving Ed and Al alone to figure out the ODM gear for themselves. Okay, so this goes here, said Ed as he tried to both read his manual and put the pieces of his ODM gear together. Alphonse was busy reading the book before he started to put the pieces together, quietly mumbling to himself as he read the instructions. Ed sighed. If only Winry was here, he whispered to himself. She would have put this together with her eyes closed. Looks like you two are having some trouble, said Petra as she walked into the room with her usual soft simile. Don't worry, I remember when I did this before. It wasn't easy to understand for me at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's a bit like having another limb. She stopped herself, quickly remembering that Ed had a metal left leg. You know what? I'll help you guys. Thank you, Petra, said Alphonse as he put down the manual. Yeah, we really appreciate it, replied Ed, smiling as put the pieces down on the table. Take this and sit down, Levi ordered as he handed them both a brown folder and pointed them towards a desk. As both Edward and Alphonse sat down at the table, they watched as Hang enthusiastically directed Moblet, who was busy sketching an image onto the large blackboard in front of them. Levi moved off to the side and observed as he sat down onto a wooden crate nearby. Perfect, Moblet, Hang complimented as she gave her assistant a thumbs up. She turned around to face Edward and Alphonse with a beaming smile. "Hello Elrix." She greeted them. "I know you're probably wondering why you aren't doing more ODM gear training, but I've discussed with Levi and we both agreed to give you a proper lesson on the Titans, specifically the Colossal and the Armored Titans." Both Hang and Moblet moved away from the center of the board to revel a masterfully drawn image of two Titans and their scale, one towering over the other, but what disturbed both Ed and Alphonse was that the image looked like a human without any skin. The other beside it was about the same height as other Titans, 15 meters, but drawn more bulky like someone wearing padded armor. "We've heard of those too," Ed commented. "That twitchy officer who almost killed us mentioned about how the Armored Titan might attack. The Colossal Titan is the reason the gate to Shiganshina district was breached, and in the chaos of the evacuation the Armored Titan must have entered through and rammed himself through the gates of Wall Maria," Hang explained. "Two large gates which no regular Titan could hope to pass through. It's been theorized that should the Colossal Titan appear, then the Armored Titan will be nearby." Moblet added, "It's entirely like a coordinated attack. But wouldn't that mean if we capture any of the enemy shifters' spies, then there'll be others nearby to assist?" Alphonse inquired. "That might be the case and is why we're preparing you," Levi added as he sat off the side watching. "The road to taking back Shiganshina will mean having to go through them, and taking those ugly bastards on like other Titans won't be an option." "Exactly, their intelligence and unique traits will prove to be difficult to conquer," Hang stated. "Firstly, the Armored Titan. Witness testimony states that the armor is indestructible as cannon fire failure to break through, and that will certainly mean our blades will be useless against it, and whether Aaron's Titan will be enough to take on the Armored Titan and win is yet to be tested. And on the Colossal Titan, it's estimated to be around 60 meters in height, that 4 times larger than the tallest Titan and 10 meters taller than the walls itself," Moblet explained. According to a report by Aaron Yeager, another feature is its ability to emit torrents of steam which kept him at bay from landing a fatal blow against the Titan. Alphonse listened anxiously, an uncomfortable feeling troubling him, to the information. Ed grimaced slightly as began to imagine the haunting image of a skinless-faced giant lifting its head over those walls and looking down on everyone. "Hey, you two," called out Levi, "think you can make something like this?" Showing him a drawing of what looked to be the layout of a gymnastic obstacle course which consisted of a few slanted side steps, some river rocks steps, a single barrier, a few hurdles and a balance beam at the end. "Sure thing," replied Alphonse, standing on an open field about a mile away from the castle with himself, Ed, Levi and Oluo. It took Ed and Al a few minutes to set up the entire obstacle course. It quickly became apparent to Levi that alchemy could use to cut corners and save hours of time and resources, so he was going to make the most of their abilities to his advantage. Despite his now gradually diminishing suspicions of the two, he was curious to see more of its use, especially how it would help save lives, similar to the battle in Trost. Once the obstacle course was completed, Levi then began to explain the next part of ODM gear training. "All right, this next part is about the ability to be agile in your movements with the ODM gear attached to you," said Levi. "Now reports say that the two are pretty agile yourselves, so the good news is that we won't have to go through any tests of speed or strength and get straight onto the course itself. Oluo here is going to demonstrate it first." He then turned to look at Oluo. "With pleasure," remarked Oluo, "I'll show you two how it's done." With the ODM gear attached to his waist, he took his place at the start of the course. "Okay," said Levi, in 3, 2, 1. Oluo sprinted towards the first obstacle. He was breezing through it at first, trying to show off his years of experience. "Pay close attention, kiddos. You're watching a master at war." He then bit his tongue as he leapt over the third hurdle. The sudden pain and shock sent him crashing into the fourth hurdle. Levi sighed to himself and pinched the bridge of his nose in disappointment. "TCH, idiot," he muttered under his breath. Alphonse turned to Oluo. "Ed, you're up first." Ed attached his ODM gear onto himself while trying to hold back laughter he felt eat away at him as Alphonse dragged Oluo off the course while covering Oluo's mouth with a piece of cloth as not to let the blood stain his uniform. "All right, try not to make the same mistake he did. We'll keep going through this until you two feel comfortable carrying the gear," remarked Levi as Ed took up his place at the start of the obstacle course. In 3, 2, 1. "Hey Hang," said Ed as he walked into the room. Hang was laying out a bed for Ed to lay on for the examination of his automail leg. She had told Ed that they'd do 3 examinations per week after bugging Levi enough times to get him to agree to a timetable. It was the 2nd one this week and the 8th examination in total. "Hello again, Ed," said Hang. "You know the drill. Roll up your trouser leg and lie down. Today we're going to have a look at the different wiring." "Moblet not here today?" asked Ed as he lay down on the bed. "No, not today sadly," replied Hang as she was getting out her tools, notepad and pencil. "He's extremely hungover after yesterday, don't know why he's always constantly drinking." "Oh, so did you get a hold of the chunk of wall yet?" asked Ed. Almost every time he came to these examinations he asked Hang about it. The mystery of what those walls were made of still puzzled him. "No, but I did find out where those fragments are being held," Hang replied. "I had some people ask around and found out those fragments are being held by the wall cultists. Turns out they're moving crates of the stuff to the capital." Hang removed the metal plating at the front of the leg and began to gently poke and examine the different wires of the automail. "What kind of metal is in the inside of this wiring?" "I think it's copper," Ed replied. "Excellent. Anyway, I went up to their church in Hermina where they're currently being held and asked the minister if I can examine them," said Hang as she began to take note of the wire structure within the automail. "Needless to say I got an earful from him." A devious smile then formed on her face. "I was however able to snag a small piece when they weren't looking. They were just there in a box in the middle of the church, just out in the open. What was I supposed to do?" "Have you found out anything about it?" asked Ed. "Placing it under that special microscope, I'd say the texture and composition of it is quite unique. I've hardly ever seen anything like it before. It's definitely not bricks and cement, that's for sure, and it's more similar to a crystal if anything." "A crystal?" questioned Ed. "To be more specific, its atomic structure is similar to a diamond, the strongest material on Earth, but its atoms are far more condensed, making it much harder than a diamond. It would explain why the colossal titan only ever attacks the gate. This material must be close to impenetrable," observed Hang. Ed thought on this. It would make sense. Walls like these would be almost impossible to maintain, and it would have been only a matter of time before the walls began to break down. But being made out of a crystal with similar properties to diamonds would make the wall not only impenetrable but also long-lasting for perhaps millions of years. This raised the question, where the hell did they get this kind of material and in such large quantities to build thousands of miles of walls around themselves? It was just impossible, but then again, after everything they've seen, they couldn't discount anything. It felt as though he was only scratching the surface of this mystery. They'd need to go to the wall itself. "Hang, is it possible for Al and I to borrow that fragment for our own research? Learning about the crystal and its composition and structure would give us an understanding of it and allow us to perform alchemy on the material, which could come in handy for the future," explained Ed. "Also I'd dash." He was then cut off. "My Hang." "Say no more, Ed," she replied. "You're not the only one suspecting that there's something strange going on. If you boys can learn anything about this fragment, then maybe we can use your alchemy on the wall. It could help in this investigation, and I better inform Levi and Commander Irwin of this, in case we get into trouble and need someone to bail us out, and I'm sure Commander Irwin would like to get to the bottom of this too. You two are in the inner circle now," she said, smiling. "Now can you please move your toes?" Ed complied and began to move his toes in his automail leg. "So these wires must act as substitute nerves, which must mean they're connected to the actual nerves in your body," she observed, scribbling it down onto a notebook. Today was the day. The day they'd actually get to use the ODM gear for real. They were going to try using it first to traverse through the forest nearby the castle. Aaron wanted to be there with them to watch and show off his own skill, but Hang was carrying out an experiment on him, something about putting him in a well nearby. "All right, you two, today's the day," said Levi. "How you do will decide how fucked you are on the expedition in a month's time. Succeed, then you're only slightly fucked. Fail and you're really fucked." He then took out the handles of his own ODM gear. "Now follow my lead." He then fired the steel wire hooks onto nearby trees and pulled himself upwards onto the branches. Ed and Al looked at each other. Ed shrugged his shoulders and fired the cables from his gear onto other nearby trees. He lost his composure for a second while being pulled forward by the cables and accelerated forward by the gas, the air quickly blowing past his face, but he was able to stick the landing on the nearby branch. Alphonse quickly followed suit. He was a bit wobbly in the air but was able to land on the other branch successful. "Not bad for your first time," remarked Levi, slightly impressed. He then pointed towards a large tree with a wooden balcony around its trunk with Eld standing there to evaluate their performance with Levi. "All right, that's the objective. Try to reach that tree and not crash your big heads onto any of the branches. Alright, now one at a time, I'll go first. He then fired the cables and reeled himself forward, propelling himself forward into the air every now and then until he reached the platform, sticking a graceful landing. "You first, brother," said Alphonse. Ed pressed pulled the triggers on his handles. This time he braced himself for the moment he was pulled forward by the steel wires. Similar to performing alchemy, ODM gear required him to stay focused 100% of the time and concentrate on doing 10 things at once: firing the steel wires, using the gas to accelerate yourself, detaching the hooks and reeling them back, soar through the air for a few seconds using the momentum and then repeat the process. At some point they'd also have to incorporate killing titans into this. Ed mainly fired the steel wires and reeled himself forward until the final stretch, when he propelled himself through the air and landed on the wooden balcony, his boot skidding across the surface as he landed. "Not bad," said Levi. "A little shaky during the parts when you were in midair, but overall a good performance for your first time," added Eld. "Thanks," replied Ed. "Alphonse," shouted Levi, "you're up next." Alphonse fired the steel cables from his gear on the nearby trees. Using the forward momentum, he soared through the air for longer than Ed before firing his cables again and repeating the process. He reeled himself forward to the large tree and landed steadily onto the balcony. "Pretty good," remarked Levi. "Good at keeping for composure while in the air and using the momentum to carry you forward, but when reeling yourself forward your posture could do with some work," added Eld. "So boys, overall I'd say you did well," said Levi. "Obviously there's room for improvement, but you should be proud of yourselves. Usually people don't get the hang of this on the first time, they usually end up splattered onto a tree. I'll write the progress report to Erwin and tell Hi Dash." He was then interrupted by the sound of a lightning strike, catching everyone's attention. "That must be Aaron," said Alphonse. "Probably nothing to worry, Dash," said Levi. Out of the corner of his eye he picked up what looked to be red flare past the branches and leaves. "Something's happened, we have to go now," he ordered, leaping off the wooden platform, Eld, Ed, and Alphonse following him. Chapter 18, Teamwork. Levi, Eld, Ed, and Alphonse quickly made their way out of the forest and towards the location of the red flare. Within their view they caught sight of a large mass of smoke and a group of people surrounding it. Once they reached the edge of the forest they swung down onto the ground and ran towards the smokes and the crowd of people circling around. They passed through the crowd of scouts and saw Aaron struggling to pull his arm out of a large skinless arm and Hang and Moblet, who was holding a smoking pistol in his hands, standing in between him and the rest of Levi's squad, whose blades were drawn, looking ready to strike Aaron down. "Look, everyone, just stay calm, there's no need to do anything rash," said Hang as she stuck her hands out in front of them. Aaron stared into the faces of Petra, Gunther, and Oluo. They all looked as though they wanted to kill him. There was nothing but rage in their eyes as their grip of the handles of their blades tightened. "Like you're one to talk, Hang," replied Oluo. He sounded furious. "Hang, Moblet, back away," yelled Petra. "You better start talking now, Aaron," ordered Gunther. "Prove to us you aren't the enemy." "What the hell happened here?" said Eld to himself, stunned as he walked up to his squad members. "Hang," Levi called out what happened. As he, Ed and Alphonse quickly walked towards her, also putting himself between Aaron and his squad. Before Hang could answer, Aaron began pleading to the captain, catching his attention. "Please sir," he yelled, "I didn't mean to transform, I don't know why it did it." Levi looked at Aaron, the sheer look of panic and fear on his face. In his gut he could tell Aaron was telling the truth at this. "Aaron, it's okay. I believe you," reassured Levi, his tone of voice still both calm and intimidating. "Aaron," yelled Ed as he looked at him, "don't worry, we'll get down from there. You boys stay back too," ordered Petra. "Captain, you need to be at a safe distance, it's dangerous." Ed and Alphonse didn't listen. Instead they tried to climb the large arm, but as soon as the palms of their hands made contact with the skinless muscle, the immense heat from the body burnt them. It felt as though they'd placed their hands on a burning stove. They quickly moved back, waving their hands around trying to cool them off. "Aren't you boys listening?" yelled Oluo. "Stay back. Look everyone, just calm down," said Levi. "We'll get an explanation, but I need you to just calm down. You better start talking now if you want to keep on living," threatened Gunther, walking forward. "You so much as twitch and I'll cut your head off." threatened Oluo as he took a few steps closer. Suddenly the ground beneath them shook and elevated slightly, causing the three of them to stumble backwards. They regained their composure to see Ed with his hands in the grass. "Stay the hell back," he said in a threatening tone, standing his ground. Alphonse reached out and grabbed onto Aaron, using him to climb up the large arm. "Come on, pull," he instructed to Aaron as he stood behind him, his boots firmly planted in the exposed muscle and his hands wrapped tightly around Aaron's wrists. "You could be helping the enemy," yelled Gunther. "I'm helping our friend," retorted Ed. "Now back the hell off and calm down." With the help of Alphonse, Aaron was able to rip himself from the large clump of flesh. They crashed onto the ground. "Ugh!" they both exclaimed, and the Titan hand started to dissolve in a thick cloud of smoke, no longer being attached to Aaron. Levi then walked up to Aaron as Ed was helping both him and Alphonse onto their feet. "How do you feel?" he asked. Not so good, sir," responded Aaron as he looked at the dissolving Titan carcass and back to his now perfectly healed hand. "Huh," said Hang, holding a metal spoon in her hand. "Well, this is strange." Night had fallen over the castle. Levi, Squad, Ed and Alphonse waited inside the mess hall while Levi went to have a talk with Aaron in the basement and Hang and Moblet went to explain to their superiors about the incident. "So tell me if I'm missing anything," said Eld. "Aaron failed his experiment in the well and when you guys pulled him up to take a break he suddenly transformed his arm." "Yeah, that's basically what happened," said Gunther. "We were right next to him while it happened, took us all by complete surprise. Still, it was uncalled for what you did back there, threatening to kill him when he was just as shocked as you guys," said Ed. "What the hell do you know, you little runt?" replied Oluo dismissively. "What the hell did you just say?" responded Ed angrily, leaning forward in his chair. "Watch your tone, boy," Oluo replied, also leaning forward. "I've killed 39 Titans, so you better learn some respect." A sly grin began to form on Edward's mouth. "I've probably killed close to half that number in just one day," taunted Ed. He then felt a hand grip his shoulder from behind and pull him back onto his chair. He looked up to see Alphonse standing behind him, giving him a disapproving look. "Enough," Ed said. Alphonse. Eld walked over to the end of the table, where the two of them were sitting, and leaned forward onto it, separating the two. "That enough, both of you." He turned his head to face Ed. "Look, Ed, when you're out on the field you have to be ready for anything. Every time we go on an expedition we always run the risk of dying out there. That's why we have to be quick in both our thinking and our reactions. I doubt they harbor a grudge against Aaron, and truth be told if I was there too instead of with you guys I would have reacted the same way as them." Ed slumped into his chair and let out a sigh. "All right, I'm sorry I acted out." "It's all right," replied Gunther. Just then the main door opened and in walked both Hang and Moblet, back from their meeting with the brass. Hang walked over to the group while Moblet walked to the door to the basement to inform Levi and Aaron of their return. The group waited for Levi and Aaron's appearance before they could begin discussing today's events properly. "What took you so long?" asked Levi to Hang. "What, did you stop to take a shit or something?" "Well, having tense meetings with the brass can scare the feces from one's body," remarked Hang. "Anyway, I like to draw everyone's attention to this." She then placed something wrapped in a white cloth on the table and revealed it to everyone. "A teaspoon?" asked Aaron, perplexed. "That's correct," said Hang. "Your Titan form that had erupted into being was holding this spoon, between the index finger and thumb to be specific, and an even stranger thing is that it didn't lose its shape despite the immense heat you were giving off. Is there anything you'd like to add?" "Well, I was bending over to pick the spoon, I was out of reach and began stretching out to reach it, and that's when I transformed." "Interesting," said Hang. "I think I know why you couldn't transform in the well. Kill the Titans, block a cannonball, lift the rock. When you transformed you seemed to have a clear goal in mind. Perhaps harming yourself is only a part of the reason you can transform, but the whole reason. It seems you need a clear goal in mind before taking damage to transform." Ed and Alphonse were completely stunned at what they were hearing. Aaron was able to create matter from thin air by self-inflicted damage and sheer will. This went against everything they were taught and raised to believe about the laws of alchemy and science. Tens, if not hundreds of questions needed to be answered. Hundreds of years of scientific and alchemic research was being torn to shreds as they were looking at the greatest exception to the rule. Aaron was just as stunned as them. I transformed, just to pick up a spoon." He stuttered. So, from my understanding, you didn't mean to transform on purpose, said Gunther. No, sir, replied Aaron. Gunther took a sharp intake of breath and sighed. He then looked towards Oluo and then Petra. Both of them nodded to Gunther as if signaling something. The three of them slightly clenched their hands into a fist, raised it to their mouth and bit down hard. What the? Exclaimed Hang, shocked, while Levi watched with a stone-faced expression. Hey, what are you doing? Said Aaron, perplexed by their actions, while Ed and Al slightly cringed when they saw blood trickle from their mouths. I bet that must hurt like hell, said Eld, secretly glad he accompanied Levi to oversee the Elric's training today, else he might have been in the same situation as them. It does, replied Gunther. Look Aaron, we made a judgment call and we were wrong. Seems as though what Ed said was right. Edon's mouth formed into a sly smile at Gunther's statement. Consider this our way of apologizing, that is if you can forgive us. Remember, this doesn't change anything, said Oluo. We're still going to keep you in check. He then turned to face Ed. And don't you get cocky, you little brat. Who you calling little? Questioned Ed, angrily. You're only a few centimeters taller than me. Aaron, we were scared, said Petra, remorsefully. It's no excuse and you must be disappointed in us for what happened and you have every right to be, but, we can't survive if we don't have faith in each other. We act as a group and I hope that you can count on us. It was a long journey to the Cadet Corps training grounds. Erwin had gotten permission by Keith Shoddies to use the Titan dummies for Ed and Alphonse's final test with the ODM gear. They were to be put into a mock battle. The objective was to hunt down as many Titans as they could and sufficiently kill them. They were also to be assessed on their skill using the ODM gear, their situational awareness and teamwork. Levi, Ed, and Alphonse sat on the wagon to their destination, both of them looking back on their notes for last-minute revision. 10 centimeters across and 1 meter lengthwise, that's the area of their weakness, said Ed. I'm a bit nervous, brother, laughed Alphonse lightly. Me too, Al, replied Ed, but we'll get past it, I know we can. Hey, you two, interrupted Levi. We're here, the Cadet Forest Training Grounds. Chief Instructor Keith Shoddies is going to be accompanying us as well as some of the cadets, so I want you on your best behavior. Yes, sir, said Alphonse. As they left the wagon they were greeted by a towering bald individual with dark circles around his brown eyes. He looked to be maybe in his late 40s, they didn't really know, with those wrinkles on his forehead. Elrix, meet cadet instructor and former commander of the Scout Regiment, Keith Shoddies, introduced Levi. It's a pleasure to meet you both, you two have quite the reputation, he said, his voice sounding strict and intimidating. From what I heard you boys are skilled and intelligent but can be a loose cannon at times. Shame you weren't a part of the Cadet Corps before you became scouts, I would have been able to rectify that kind of behavior. Ed and Alphonse looked at the man, unsure how to respond to what he said. Heh, said Keith, come on, I'll show you to your starting points. They arrived outside the edge of a forest near the training camp. Ed and Alphonse had now attached the blades from their scarab onto their handles, ready to the go-ahead. This is a combat simulation, said Levi. There are Titans shattered across the forest of an area within 3 miles. Your objective is to dispatch the Titans. Your skill with the ODM gear, your effectiveness on how to take out the Titans as well as your overall teamwork will be assessed by the examiners, and this will go straight to me, which I'll have to report back to Erwin, so try not mess this up. Yes, sir, replied Alphonse. Don't worry, we've got this, replied Ed with a cocky smile on his face. Suddenly the sound of a pistol went off nearby. That's the signal, yelled Levi. Now go. Ed and Alphonse fired the steel cables from their ODM gear and reeled themselves forward onto the trees. I'll keep to the right, you're to the left, Al. 7-meter spread, said Ed. All right, replied Alphonse, keep your eyes open in case any of them are hiding behind the trees. They fired off their cables again and were now soaring past the trees, keeping their eyes out for any of the dummy Titans being operated by different instructors. Ed spotted one in front of him, exposing itself from behind the trees. Found one. He yelled, firing his cables onto the branch slightly above it. He reeled himself forward towards the target, angling his blades for a deep cut to the foam around the dummy Titan's neck. Zooming overhead of the Titan, he sliced a chunk out of the dummy Titan's nape. Ed turned around. He was now ahead of Alphonse. He spotted a Titan hiding behind the tree, and it looked as though it was going to swing in front of Alphonse's path. Al, Ed yelled, one behind the tree to your left. As soon as he said that did the dummy Titan swing into the direction of Alphonse's path. Reacting quickly, Alphonse fired his cables onto two nearby trees and quickly reeled himself upwards in an almost straight line, narrowly avoiding crashing into the dummy Titan. He spun around in the air and fired his cables into the nape just below him and reeled himself downwards to strike. He detached his cables and swung his blades and parted the foam neck in the middle, leaving a large cut, and quickly fired them again to a nearby tree, before he hit the ground and reeled himself onto one of branches close by. "All right, L," yelled Ed, cheering on his little brother. Erwin sat behind his desk, finalizing the plans for the scouting expedition in a bit over a week's time, when his attention was caught by someone opening his office door. It was Levi, here with the report on the Elric's progress with their ODM training. Hopefully it was good news and that the Elrics had shown themselves to be proficient with the gear, else he would have to divert some scouts to act as their protection. "Got the progress report," said Levi, handing him a folder full of papers. Erwin opened the folder and skim-read through the pages. "All in all, I'd say those two are as ready as they can be and be relied upon in the field to not end up as the meal of the day, and maybe with a little experience they might turn out to be something almost resembling skilled." That being said, Keith made note specifically about their coordination, said they worked well as a unit. Erwin smiled. "Great work. Perhaps when this is all over you could move into being a training instructor," he joked. "TCH, not a chance in hell," responded Levi, rolling his eyes. "Taking care of a bunch of brats is no picnic. Can't imagine doing it for a living. So how'd the graduations go?" "Better than expected," replied Erwin. "We averaged around 40 new members per division. I suspect it has something to do with Cadet Jaeger and the Elrics being inducted into our ranks. We'll only have to take some of them with us for the coming expedition. That being said, though, we'll mostly be using recruits from the Southern 104th Division." "So I'm assuming you've already finalized the plans?" asked Levi. "Yes, however it had occurred to me that whoever is after Eren Jaeger will also be likely after the Elrics as well, and we need them for when we capture the enemy shifter." He then pointed into the center of the formation. "So I've decided to place them here. They'll ride in one of the wagons to the Forest of Giants." "And we'll ride into the trap you'll have waiting for the enemy shifter?" asked Levi. "Correct," answered Erwin. "We'll have false information about them be divulged to the cadets joining us, Eren, Edward, and Alphonse being part of either of the center guards. Whichever side gets attacked, then we'll be able to narrow down the search for the other enemy shifters. Of course, however, Eren will be with you in the center rear guard and the Elrics will be hidden in the wagons among the wagon support teams. Inform them of this and the reason why, however don't inform Eren of this." "All right," replied Levi. "Also another thing," said Erwin, "Hang has informed me of a new development. It seems the walls that protect humanity harbor a secret unknown to the rest of us. Apparently the walls are made of a crystal-like substance rather than brick and mortar. She'd like to investigate it and she'll need the Elric's help. So here's what will happen. You and Hang are to take the Elrics to Trost to rebuild the entrance. Use that as the excuse. On your way back to our former HQ you are to take a little detour to an unoccupied part of Walrose." "Got it," said Levi as he left the office. Ed and Alphonse arrived back at the castle. It was late in the afternoon. They went into the mess hall to make themselves some food. Ed began boiling some bean soup in a metal bowl and took out 2 pieces of bread from the straw sack. Alphonse sat at an empty table writing down notes into a book. "Here, Al," said Ed as he placed down a plate, as he placed down a bowl of bean soup and a piece of bread in front of Alphonse. "Not as good as the food back home, but it'll have to do," he said as he shoveled a spoonful of bean soup into his mouth and swallowed. "What I wouldn't give for some meat though." "Yeah," said Alphonse. "Guess being a scout doesn't come with the same perks as being state alchemist, huh?" He joked as he tore his bread in half and dipped it into the soup. "Hey Al, what ya writing?" asked Ed, looking at the small handbook. "Oh, it's notes about alchemy," replied Alphonse. "I've been trying to write down everything I know about the subject, what May taught me and what I learned from my own research back home. I'm hoping that by doing this I can try and figure out where I went wrong." "You still hung up about Mylius' death?" said Ed. "I can't let that happen again, brother," replied Alphonse. "Next time I won't let my ignorance get the better of me." He then took a bite out of the soup-soaked bread. "Hey!" came a voice to their left. It was Eren. He walked up to them and took a seat next to Ed. "So how did the test go?" he asked. "It went well," said Alphonse. "The instructor said that we were pretty competent in ODM gear. Guy was scary, remember the look he gave us, Al?" asked Ed. "Yeah, had a really intense look about him," replied Alphonse. "Wait, you met Shotties?" asked Aaron. "He was the instructor during our 3 years as cadets." "Heh, that must have been tough," replied Ed. "Hey, when you said that I'm you guys' friend, did you mean that?" asked Aaron. "Of course," said Alphonse. "We may not have gotten off on the right foot, but we do see you as our friend Aaron. We've got your back," Ed said before taking a bite out of his loaf of bread. Aaron smiled softly. "Thanks, you guys." Chapter 19, Reputation. "Thank you," said Alphonse as an old woman handed him a bundle of flowers. They were passing through the town connected to Wall Rose. Their area was bustling with people as groups of workers and soldiers passed through the tunnel into Trost district. "No, thank you," replied the old woman. "You boys helped save this town, it's the least I can offer." "Well, isn't that sweet?" said Hang, watching from the front with a soft smile on her face. "We're here to repair the gate, and once we've done that we make our detour," informed Levi as they came into sight of the gate into Trost, the large gate lifted above the entrance of the long tunnel and held up by massive chains. Ed studied the feminine face on the gate above them. Wall Rose. He thought about Rose back on their world. The last time he saw her was back in Riol Stilling trying to rebuild the town. Ed made a mental note to tell her about the crazy cult that worshipped the walls and how one of them had the same name as her when he gets the chance to see her again, hopefully with her fiancé back. Levi, Hang, Ed, Alphonse and their escort of 10 other scouts rode their horses through the gate of Wall Rose into Trost. It was late in the morning. Ed and Alphonse watched as the residents of Trost still continued to rebuild their homes and their lives, and it looked as though they were no closer to making a dent into the amount of work they needed to do than when the two of them were here last time. Houses were stilling looking hand destroyed with their roofs caved in and walls barely being held up or completely destroyed. Entire buildings and whole streets demolished because of the Titan attack, not to mention the rubble that still lined the streets and blocking the occasional path, and the worst part was the blood splatters which could be found either on the paths or on the walls of homes lining the street. All around, the sound of hammers, saws, and murmured instructions occupied the air as a small army of people worked endlessly to the seemingly unreachable goal of returning Trost to its former glory. As Alphonse looked around, he couldn't help but think of the time when he had returned to Riol during its reconstruction after its devastating uprising, and much like Riol, those responsible were monsters who saw humans as nothing more than something to be used, or in this case devoured. They arrived at the sealed breach. The open space was occupied by a platoon of garrison soldiers and workers with pickaxes who were chipping away at the pillars and spikes which spurred from the ground. Before them was what seemed to be the rest of the boulder which Ed had split off, as well as some other bits of rubble and long stretch of steel girders. "You guys are here to fix the gate," said the garrison captain. There wasn't anything too special about him: average height, middle-aged stubble on his chin and balding, and the guy never gave them his name. That letter from Commander Irwin said as much. He then pointed towards the rubble and large rock. "Think you can use your magic to make a gate out of that? It's got to be about 10 meters in length and width and 2 meters thick," he asked. Ed walked up to the pile of rocks. He clapped his hands together and placed them onto the rubble. The large bits of rock morphed together to form a large stone slab, similar to the one at the entrance of Wall Rose. It even had an engraving of the feminine face with a crown on it. "That ought to do it," Ed said, dusting his hands off. To the side, Alphonse transmuted the long steel girders into long steel chains. "You guys just turned years' worth of work in less than 30 seconds. Remarked the garrison captain, rubbing the back of his head. "All right, I'll have some of my guys hoist it up from the wall. There's more of the same material up on the wall. We'll need 2 gates if we're to properly secure this entrance again. There isn't enough space on the wall for you to make the complete gate, so you'll have to make about a quarter of the gate only, and then I'll have some of the engineers lower it down. You'll have to complete while hanging from the other side of the wall, and on top of that we still need to lure the Titans still inside the tunnel outside. I'll have a large group of my men hang from other side of the wall. Think you can do work while having Titan pass under you?" "We've got it covered," said Ed. He and Alphonse then fired the cables of their ODM gear onto the walls and reeled themselves up to the top. They did as instructed. They transmuted a quarter of a large stone slab and the steel chains connecting it to the walls. They lowered themselves onto the other side of the wall as the garrison engineers lowered the unfinished gate and large chunks of rubble down to them. As Ed transmuted the chunk of rock into the stone slab, he occasionally turned his attention to the Titans inside the tunnel that were passing underneath him and walking towards the direction of the garrison soldiers. Ed wiped off the sweat from his brow as he merged the final piece onto the suspended stone gate. It took a good hour for them to finish the gate piece by piece, all the while Levi, Hang and their scout escort stood off the edge of the wall watching for the group of Titans in case they started wandering back in. "Okay, it's done," yelled Ed, giving the garrison engineers the thumbs up. He and Al then reeled themselves back up onto the wall. The gate then lowered down, sealing the entrance from the outside. Edward and Alphonse then lowered themselves down onto the other side of the wall to meet the captain again. "Good work, you two been a great help to us. Now all we'll need to do is open the breach. The engineers can sort out the rest." Ed clapped his hands together and placed them on the stone seal they had made to plug the breach. He opened a hole to the tunnel, the same height and width of the gate. As the entrance opened up, Ed caught sight of the rubble that littered the tunnel. "Those guys have their work cut out for them," thought Ed. He was then tapped on the shoulder. He looked behind to see Levi with Alphonse standing next to him. "So," said Levi to Ed and Alphonse, "that should be it then. Let's make our way back." He was interrupted by one of the workers. "Excuse, but could you help us get rid of these stone spikes and pillars around here? We've been trying to get rid of these things for almost a month now, but we're no closer to clearing them up as we were when we started," he asked. "Of course," replied Alphonse. "And could you get rid of that long wall and restore the road? And also the mess on that other street?" asked another worker. "Could you also repair the roof of my house?" asked a random woman. Suddenly a growing crowd began to converge on them, asking them if they could quickly repair the damage done to their homes and neighborhoods. They both looked at Levi, who was standing next to them, wondering if he'd let them help these people. Levi observed the faces of those Trost residents, their tired eyes and their dirt and bloodied hands from the endless hours of work. He sighed. "It's your call," he said simply. "We'll wait by the horses, just don't take too long." He, Hang and the other scouts all grabbed the reins of their horses and walked off towards the gate to Walrose. Hang looked over to Levi. "Thought you said we'd only fix the gate and then leave?" she asked with a small grin on her face. "We can afford to wait," replied Levi, not turning his head to face her. "Beside, waiting until dark would be the best option." The grin on Hang's face grew wider as she placed her arm on Levi's shoulder nonchalantly. "You hide it but can be a real softie sometimes." Levi rolled his eyes and brushed off Hang's arm dismissively. "Shut it, shitty glasses," he said, slightly irritated. It was now late in the afternoon and the two had been working non-stop helping the citizens of Trost rebuild their damaged city. Ed was repairing the wall of a house. The whole place was barely being held up by its wooden pillars when he came to help. Now it was once again something that could be called home. "Thank you again," said the middle-aged woman. She had brown hair done up in a ponytail and wore a red apron. "It's no problem. I used to do stuff like this back home for people," said Ed, "except this time I'm not trying to lure a serial killer out of hiding," he thought. Here she then gave him something wrapped in a thin brown cloth that felt tough and leathery. Ed opened the cloth to reveal a chunk of dried meat. "Whoa, meat," he thought, surprised. For the past month he and Alphonse had eaten a mixture of soup with either peas or potatoes with bread. It was only very rarely they'd get their hands on some meat, and even then it was thin strips of veal. "It's been too long." He looked up to face the woman. The hastily constructed houses quickly reminded him that the people in Trost were in a difficult situation. Meat was rare in this world and a lot of people were starving. Perhaps it was the same for this woman and her family. I can't take this," he said. "It's yours," he responded. "No, I insist," replied the woman. "Please, this isn't just for repairing my house. My son was part of the cadets. He may not talk to his parents much, but I heard that it was because of you, your brother and that other boy that he and his friends were able to escape, and it was because of you boys that we have our home back. Besides, it's not even mine anyways. I just found it in a chest that must ended up here during the chaos." Ed was speechless. "Thank you, Mrs. Kirsten," was all he could think to say. "I will, they'll definitely love this." "Thank you again," she replied. Ed made his way to the others waiting for him at the entrance through Walrose. He had to pass through a small crowd of people thanking Alphonse for his help. "Thank you for your help." "You're welcome," replied Alphonse, rubbing the back on his head. "It was nothing, really." "Hey," said Levi, "you two, enough chatting with the locals, get on your horse already." Ed and Alphonse both got on their horses and joined their escort through the tunnel of Walrose. They traveled along the main path until they were out of sight by the garrison soldiers. "What ve got there, brother?" asked Alphonse as he watched Ed place something in one of the pouches connected to his saddle. Some old lady gave me some meat for fixing her house, replied Ed, said we should share it with you and Aaron. Alphonse smiled at the thought. That'll be nice, it's been a while since we've had a nice meal. He said. We're out of sight, we'll head straight this way, Levi instructed, pointing in the direction left to them. We'll then begin to gradually move downwards towards the wall. We'll get there faster if we rush. He then whipped the reins of his horse, causing his horse to gallop. The others quickly then followed suit. By the time they had reached an open space of wall rows, the night has come and hid them from the world. No torches, ordered Levi, not until we know for certain that we're alone. He looked over to two other scouts. You two, you're with me, we'll check if the wall is clear. He pulled out the handles to his gear and fired the fires onto wall, reeling himself upwards. The two other scouts quickly followed suit behind the captain. While they waited, Hang talked to both Ed and Alphonse. So you two have definitely examined the piece of wall? Asked Hang. Yes, it's like you said, its atomic structure is similar to a diamond, only more dense. Replied Ed, I've never seen anything like it, it's a whole new element. This time we should be able to perform alchemy on the wall. Said Alphonse. Levi and the two other scouts lowered themselves down to the group. All clear, he said, you're free to investigate without any garrison soldiers catching you in the act. Ed and Alphonse walked up to the wall. They clapped their hands and placed them on the wall. A hole formed before them. They looked through it, expecting to see through the wall into the area of Wall Maria. Instead they saw nothing, just darkness. What the hell? Said Levi, staring into the hole. Are the walls hollow? There was whispered chatter among the rest of the scouts. Someone light a torch, ordered Hang. Quickly one of the scouts gave her a lit torch. She moved forward slightly into the hole. That's when they saw it. They all gasped and staggered back. What the hell? Yelled one of the scouts. Hang quickly stumbled back, almost dropping the torch in shock. Some of the scouts quickly took out their blades. It was a toe, a large skinless toe which must have been almost their height. The colossal titan. Said one of the scouts, it's inside the walls. Quickly Ed and Alphonse closed up the hole. When the hole was sealed they themselves stumbled away. Their eyes then scanned the wall upwards. This must be the titan that made a hole in Trost, but what is it doing inside the walls? Something's not right, said Hang, putting the torch out. Of course not, the colossal titan is in the walls, responded Levi, unsheathing his blades. He looked towards the two other scouts who had their blades out. You two, you're with me. If it starts to break down wall rows, then we're going to take it down. I want you two acting as diversions while I go for the nape and drag the son of a bitch shifter who caused all this out. The two of them nodded in response. Hang, you take the boys and the rest of the men, head to Karen's and inform Irwin, we found the colossal titan. Wait, Levi, responded Hang, I don't think that's the colossal titan. What do you mean that's not the colossal titan? Said Levi, perplexed. Reports say that the colossal titan stuck its head over the wall in Shiganshina, meaning that the colossal titan is about approximately 60 meters in height. These walls are 50 meters. She then scanned the walls left and right, a terrible realization dawning on her. Edward and Alphonse, follow me, she said, and ran off to the left. Ed and Alphonse quickly followed her. Ah, what the hell, exclaimed Levi, stay here and keep an eye on that thing. He told the other scouts. He then ran off after the three of them. Hang kept on running along the wall with Levi, Ed, and Alphonse tailing her until she suddenly stopped and turned to face them. If I'm right about this, then there should be another titan here too. She said, come on. She then fired the steel wires of her ODM gear onto the walls and reeled herself upwards until she was almost at the top. The others followed her up the wall. If my measurements are correct, then the face of the giant titan next to one we found should be here, pointing to an area to her left, but there's only one way to find out. She looked to the Elrics. They gulped down hard at thought of what she wanted them to do. They slowly pressed their hands together and gently placed them on the wall, forming the same 1-meter hole. Under the moonlight they saw what looked to be the left half of an exposed set of teeth, the left half of a skinless nose, and a large half-opened eye, which moved ever so slightly to look at Hang. Close it, ordered Levi now. Ed and Alphonse quickly sealed up the hole. The four of them reeled themselves down to the ground. All of them were stunned by what they've just seen. The walls are comprised of titans, giant titans. Said Hang to no one in particular. Giant titans are what's separating humanity from other titans who want to eat us. They then began to scan the long wall. How many do you think are in these walls? Asked Ed. Thousands? Hundreds of thousands. Hang began to add the numbers in her head, the circumference of Wall Maria, Wall Rose, and Wall Sina, and on top of that the length of the walls that surround the districts. She came to terrifying realization, over 500,000, she said, 585,000 to be precise. There are over 500,000 colossal titans just waiting in the walls, said Edward, repeating Hang's observation to himself. They're just standing there dormant for now, but if they all decide to wake from their little beauty nap, finished Levi, then humanity gonna be in some real deep shit. Chapter 20, The Burdens We Carry. In the military HQ in Cairns, Levi and Hang debriefed Irwin on their discovery of titans within the walls. It was only a day and a half away from the expedition beyond Wall Rose. Cairns was abuzz with activity, with the over 100 scouts and garrison soldiers making their final preparations. So, what you're saying is that titans with similar heights to the colossal titan line the three walls that has housed humanity for a century? Asked Irwin as he stared outside the large window in his office. Who else knows? Us, the Elrics and the scout escort with us, replied Levi, who was leaning against the door. Other than that, no else. Good, for now let's keep it that way for now, responded Irwin. We can't let those who've been hiding this secret know that we've uncovered it. The smaller the circle, the safer we'll be. We can let the others know about it when the time comes. Hang, is there anything about these titans I should know? They seem docile, similar to the captured titans when they were cut off from sunlight, so an attack by them is highly unlikely, thankfully, replied Hang. We'll need to plot a course of action with this new information. We must find out the people and groups who knew of this secret. I have no doubt that they must be hiding far more secrets from the rest of humanity, remarked Irwin. Minister Nick, the one in the court, said Hang. If anyone knows anything about those walls, he's bound to know. It would also explain why those damn cultists have been making so difficult to place some cannons on these walls. We'll need to apprehend Minister Nick then, said Irwin. This will be something we'll have to discuss further after the expedition. Tell me, how is Aaron Yeager and the Elrics doing? Are they ready for their first expedition beyond the walls? They're as trained and ready as they'll ever be, said Levi. I had my squad teach Aaron about the long-distance scouting formation. I've briefed the Elrics on their position in the formation separately, though Aaron and my squad are curious about the Elrics and why they won't be riding along with us. There was also speculation about what your question meant. I made up some excuse about squad leader Ness taking watch over them. Good, responded Irwin, staring out into the distance. One way or another we will uncover the truth. Ed, Aaron, and Alphonse were cleaning the stables. Aaron wondered about why the two of them seemed so on edge at times these last few days. When they had arrived at Cairns, he noticed how their eyes would scan the walls. It was as if they were waiting for something to happen, but whenever he'd ask them they'd snap out of it and suddenly act like their usual selves. Now was one of those times. Their nerves must be getting to them with the expedition coming up, Aaron thought, shoveling the horses' faces into a metal bucket, while Ed and Alphonse tended to the horses. Cleaning the stables is a crappy job, huh? He joked. Yeah, it is. Ed replied back with a small smile before getting back onto what he was doing. After they had finished with cleaning out the stables, the three of them left the stables back to Oluo, who was told to watch over them. They caught sight of what looked to be a large group of cadets being escorted by a few of the scouts. In the crowd, Aaron spotted two familiar faces. Hey, that's Armin and Mikasa, said as Ed and Alphonse also caught sight of them. Oluo, sir, could we go and talk to them? Yeah, sure, replied Oluo disinterred. They three of them quickly jogged over to them. Armin, Mikasa, Aaron yelled, catching their attention. They slightly gasped when they caught sight of them. Man, am I glad to see you guys. Mikasa quickly grabbed one of Aaron's hands into hers and held it tenderly. Aaron, have they mistreated or hurt you in any way? She asked with a look of concern. Have they beaten you or mentally hurt you? No, they haven't, replied Aaron, slightly taken aback. Mikasa suddenly had a look of pure anger and hatred on her face as she remembered what Levi had done to Aaron at the court case. That damn pipsqueak is gonna pay, I'll make sure of it. Wait, you mean Captain Levi? Asked Aaron as he and Alphonse both looked at her a bit concerned. You and I both, thought Ed with a sly smirk on his face, remembering the incident and feeling old emotion beginning to surface up. Hey guys, came a voice from behind Mikasa and Armin. They turned their attention to the group walking up to them. It was Connie with Sasha, Krista, Emir, Reiner, Berthold, and Mina. It's been a while, huh? Hey, Alphonse, she said, smiling. She was happy to see Alphonse looking alright. The last time she'd seen him was when Captain Levi beat him in court. She then turned her attention to the others. Aaron. Ed. How are you guys been? Great, replied Alphonse with a soft simile. So all of you joined the scouts? Asked Aaron. Well, that's why we're here, replied Connie. Yeah, right, replied Aaron. So, you two joined the scouts too? Asked Connie. Got a handle on the ODM gear? Yeah, we've got a pretty good grasp on this thing, replied Ed. Looks like we won't need to hitch a ride on you guys anymore. So did Jean, Annie, and Marco leave to join the military police? Asked Aaron. The sound of footsteps behind Aaron, Ed, and Alphonse caught everyone's attention. They turned to see who it was. It was Jean and another group of cadets. Jean. Aaron said, surprised to see him here. You joined the scouts? Marco's dead. Jean responded. Everyone around them went silent for a while with set expressions on their faces. Marco. Aaron stuttered. Marco's dead? Apparently no one was there to see it. Jean said, he died alone and there was no one there with him. The mood was now bleak as everyone fell silent for a moment over the death of their friend. Ed and Alphonse were silent out of respect for their loss. Hey rookies! Came a voice to the side. It was one of the scouts, standing in front of a wagon. Your uniforms are here. The cadets then huddled towards the wagon and were individually handed their new light brown jacket and hooded cloak with the blue and white wings sewn onto it. They threw their new green cloaks over their shoulders. Aaron, Ed, and Alphonse watched as they adorned their new uniform. Aaron said, Jean, when you have the time, we'd like to have a word later today. He then looked to Ed and Alphonse. You two should come along. In the dimly lit storage room of the military HQ, Aaron, Ed, and Alphonse met with the others to catch up about the last 2 months. I'm sorry about your friend, Marco, said Ed to the group. Back during the recovery operation in Trost, when everyone was leaving, he was the one trying to convince everyone to stay. Said Connie. Ed and Alphonse both looked to the floor somberly. So you guys are? Said Aaron. Yes, we're all going on the expedition a day from now, said Mikasa. Aaron, I heard you tried to attack Ed here while in Titan form, is that true? Asked Jean accusingly. You're wrong, that's not what happened, argued Mikasa. With all due respect, Mikasa, I wasn't asking you and you weren't the one who was attacked. If I want verification on what happened, I'll ask him, Jean said, pointing towards Ed. Ed was silent. He wondered whether he should answer truthfully. Mikasa looked at Ed with a look in her eyes as if she was desperately telling him to lie for Aaron's sake. Yeah, Ed said. Apparently I attacked Ed while I was in Titan form, Aaron said apologetically. Apparently? Interrogated Jean. You don't remember? So you can transform into a 15-meter tall Titan whenever you want, but when you're in Titan form you don't have complete control over it. Aaron looked down to the floor, like a child being scolded by their parent. Yeah, that's about it. Jean sighed. Thank God we and the rest of humanity doesn't have to rely on you completely. If we were, then it's likely we'd all end up like Marco or almost like Mina, dead before Aaron could even realize what happened, or dead because we followed him. Stop it, said Mikasa, but Jean wasn't paying attention. Of course we don't know whether we can totally rely on you two either, said Jean, focusing his attention to Ed and Alphonse. Word been going around that you two aren't exactly doing this out of the goodness of your own hearts. Some people are even saying you two are spies. So tell us, Elrix, why exactly are you here? Tell us, that way we'll know whether you're in this for the long haul or if, just like you came here, you'll both vanish into thin air one day and leave the rest of us to rot. His tone then became more authoritative. He marched up towards them, the three of them. The reason I'm asking is simply because we don't want to die for your sake just because we're ordered to. We want a reason, the truth, otherwise we'd hesitate when the time calls for decisive action. What we need from you guys is a guarantee. Tell us why you two are worth dying for. All eyes were now on Ed and Alphonse. Ed was really starting to dislike Jean for placing them on the spot like this, but he completely understood why and, in a way, respected him for it. Ed and Alphonse looked at each other. Alphonse nodded to Ed as if to show him he'll support him with whatever decision he'd make. Ed sighed. All right, we'd have to tell you guys eventually, so we might as well do it now. Remember what I said about there being something in it for us if we helped you guys defeat the Titans, Armin? He asked as both Ed and Alphonse looked to him. Yeah, I remember, Armin replied. I'm guessing this isn't exactly the circumstance you'd like to talk in. Believe or not, we made a deal with God, Ed said. Everyone, except Aaron, in the room either gasped or looked stunned. So what, are you trying to say that you two really are angels or something? Questioned Amir. No, we're human and we are from a different world, replied Alphonse. We're telling you it's God because it's easier to understand. Its name is the truth, and from our understanding it's like a god, all-powerful and all-knowing, and it's able to regulate our alchemy. We've had run-ins with it in the past. I'm not about to go into detail about that, but one day we were just snatched from our home and it made us an offer. We'll get a demand, a wish, which would allow us to do anything. We're going to use it to bring back all the people we lost over the years, and for our part we would have to help a group of people on another world fight an enemy they do not understand but seeks to kill them all. We succeed by helping you prevent that. Explained Ed. Everyone who was not privy to this information were hanging off their every word. So believe us when we say, we will do whatever it takes to reclaim Wall Maria for humanity on this world and beat back the Titans. Alphonse then walked up to Jean. The two of them looked each other in the eyes. We'll never ask you to die for us, but what we will ask of you is this: trust in us when we say that we are in this 100% of the way. All right then, replied Jean. He then turned his attention to Aaron. He grabbed him by his shoulders and brought him close so that he could look him straight in the eyes. Can we count on you too, Aaron? If so, then we're with you till the end. Aaron was taken aback for a second, but was quickly able to regain his composure. He straightened his back and Jean by his arms to pull him closer. Yes, you can trust me, all of you can trust me. I won't fail you guys, we won't fail you guys. Ed and Alphonse stood with their backs leaned up against the wall outside the military HQ. Ed looked to the ground, his arms crossed, while Alphonse stared up into the night sky watching the stars. You know, brother, said Alphonse, if you just stare into the sky, it's almost like I'm back in Resemble. Is that right, Al? Replied Ed as he too looked up. That was a pretty intense meeting. He did have a good reason though, said Alphonse, for putting us on the spot like that. Ed sighed. I guess. Hey guys, came a familiar voice from their side. They both turned their head. It was Mina. Oh, hey Mina, said Ed tiredly. Hi again, Mina, said Alphonse. Sorry about that back there, she said apologetically. Whole thing was emotionally draining. There's no need to apology. We understand, replied Alphonse. Mina sighed with relief and smiled. It's good to see you're all right, Alphonse. You don't seem to have any marks or bruises on you. We've had worse, joked Alphonse as he rubbed his face. You know, this is the district I grew up in, she told them. My house is just a few streets from here. I'm going to visit my parents tomorrow for dinner. I was wondering if you'd like to come along. Her request took both of them off guard. If you'd like. I wrote to them about you guys and what you did, and they'd like to thank you in person. We'd love to come, said Alphonse cheerfully. Great, I'll meet you guys here in the afternoon and take you there, replied Mina. She then went up and hugged Alphonse and then Ed. Thanks guys, she said before walking off. Come on brother, said Alphonse, it's getting late, we should head to our sleeping quarters. He then began to walk off. Sure, said Ed, staring at Alphonse, still leaning up against the wall. What exactly are you playing at, Al? Ed and Alphonse both arrived at the same spot they were last night to wait for Mina. They wore their knee-high boots, white trouser, a plain white shirt and a long dark brown coat with the Scout Regiment insignia sewn on it. Think we might be a bit overly dressed? Asked Ed. It's what the captain told us to wear when going out, replied Alphonse. I know. He went on a whole spiel about how looking presentable is everything for like 10 minutes. Remarked Ed. Hey guys, yelled Mina walking towards them. She was dressed plain brown trousers and a long-sleeved teal blouse. You guys didn't have to dress so smartly, she joked. Captain's orders, replied Ed. Come on, I'll show you the street I grew up in, she said, waving her arm at them to follow. They walked down a narrow dirt path lined with houses made of wood and stone on each side. I remember I used to play with the other kids on this street. This one big kid used to chase all of us down the road pretending to be a titan. Hey, came a young voice to their side. The three of them turned to see it was a little boy, and beside him was a little girl who they assumed is his sister. Are you guys from the Scout Regiment? He asked excitedly. Yeah, did the big white and blue wings on our backs give it away? Said Ed. They're called the Wings of Freedom, said Alphonse as he pointed to the badge on his left shoulder. Have you guys killed any titans? He asked. A bunch in Trost, said Alphonse. That's so cool, the two little kids exclaimed. When I get older I gonna join the scouts. He then ran off with his sister down the street. The three of them looked back at the two kids running off. They continued walking for a minute and stopped at one of the houses in the middle of street. This is my house. She then knocked on the door and a middle-aged woman opened it. She was the slightly taller than Mina, had light blue eyes and long thick black hair done up in a single ponytail which rested on her left shoulder. Mina, the woman said with a large smile as she went in for a hug. Hi Mom, replied Mina as she hugged her. As they let go she then introduced the Elrics. Mom, this is Ed and Alphonse Elric. It's a pleasure to meet you two, she said. Mina told us a lot about you two. Please come in. They walked inside the house. The lower half of the house looked to be separated into an open space with a wooden table and chairs in the middle and some candles attached to some wooden beams near the middle of the open space, a kitchen in a separate room, and in front of the door was a staircase leading up. What a lovely house you have, Mrs. Carolina, said Alphonse. Why thank you, she responded. Please have a seat at the table. She then looked to Mina. Your father upstairs getting dressed, he'll be down soon. She then walked into the kitchen while the three of them sat down at the table. The sound of footsteps coming down the stairs caught their attention. It was Mina's father. He too was also middle-aged, light brown hair, clean-shaven with gray eyes and looked to be a few centimeters taller than Ed and Alphonse. Dad greeted Mina as she walked up to him and hugged him tightly. Mina, it's good to see you again, he said, and you two must be the Elric brothers. I'm guessing you're Ed, he said, extending his hand. Yeah, that's right, Ed replied as he shook his hand. And you must be Alphonse. Yes, sir, said Alphonse politely shaking his hand. You're actually like what Mina described. It's an honor to meet you two, he said, sitting down. At the end of the table, Mina said a lot of good things about you boys in her letter. Thank you for saving her. It's no problem, replied Ed, we're just doing what we can. Mina, honey, could you help me for a little bit? Asked her mother. Coming, Mom, she replied as she got up from her chair and into the kitchen. Honestly boys, thank you, my wife and I owe you so much for saving daughter's life, he said somberly, only looking at the table. Mina stood near the doorway, listening on the conversation unknown to the three at the table. We never told her this, but when the news came about what happened in Trost and the cadet crops being a part of the evacuation and recovery efforts, we were just terrified, and then the military officials starting coming to people's doors to tell them the bad news about their kids. Even a street across we could hear the cries. My wife prayed they'd never visit, and every time I saw one pass the house I swear my heart just stops beating. She's our only child, you see. When we got that letter from her it felt as if mountains had been lifted from our backs, and then we read that she joined the scout regiment. It feels as though that weight that left us only for a second has come back. He turned to face Ed and Alphonse. You two have done a lot for this family already, but please I ask you, look out for her tomorrow when you go out beyond the walls. Ed and Alphonse looked at the man speechless. They didn't know what they could tell him. We'd love to, but we're kind of on a secret mission, which means we're posted away from your daughter, so protecting her is out of the question. Said Ed, who was then abruptly interrupted. Of course, replied Alphonse, almost blurting it out. Ed turned towards Alphonse with a perplexed look on his face. Thank you, he replied with a tender smile on his face. You know, she told me that you were the one who saved her, Alphonse. If you plan on marrying her you have my blessing, he teased. Alphonse's face immediately turned bright red. I'm teasing, of course, he said, grinning. Guys like you two, you probably have someone special waiting for you back home. Ed does, don't you, brother? Alphonse joked. You and Winry? Shut up, Al, said Ed playfully. What about you and May? Last I remember she was crazy about you. Suddenly there was a loud clang in the kitchen, catching everyone's attention. Sorry, said Mina. Dropped something. I haven't seen her in 2 years, replied Alphonse, thinking back to May. She's probably grown out of that phase by now. Ed eyed Alphonse questioningly. His attention was quickly drawn to Mina and her mother coming through the kitchen door, holding a bowl filled with different vegetables and a wooden cutting board with 2 large cooked fishes. This looks lovely, Mrs. Carolina, said Alphonse. Why thank you, she replied as she and Mina sat down to eat. Throughout the dinner and the conversations, all Ed could do was glance over to Alphonse every so often. "All right, you two get in the wagon," said Levi. "Gate goes up in 5 minutes." Ed and Alphonse climbed onto the lone wagon, parked at the corner of the street, out of sight from the main column of soldiers. It was filled with crates and stacks of gas canisters. Alphonse made a last-minute check of his ODM gear and adjusted the button on his green hood cloak, while Ed took out his pocket watch from the front right pocket of his brown waistcoat and looked upon the picture of him. "Winry and Alphonse will be back soon, Winry. You boys on?" asked the driver. "Yeah," they both replied. "All right, it's full speed ahead when the gate open, so hold on tight," said the driver as he moved the wagon to join up with the other wagons in the large column on the main road, the wagon ever so slightly shaking as the horses began to pull up towards the others and coming to a halt. "You nervous, Al?" asked Ed as the sound of the large bell rang overhead. "A little bit, brother," replied Alphonse as he gripped his hands together. "Hey, don't worry, before you know it we'll have that wall plugged up and we'll be back home in no time," said Ed. "Yeah," Alphonse replied simply. In truth, he wasn't worried about making it out alive. He knew that both he and Ed could handle themselves. He was anxious over keeping his promise to Mina's dad. He was trying his best to convince himself she'd be fine being on the left wing with Mikasa. 30 seconds. Came a yell from ahead of the column. Aaron stared ahead at the many other scouts ahead of him and the large gate. Beside him to his right was Petra and his left was Oluo. His attention was caught by the sound of light gasps to his left. He shifted his head to see two small children peering through a window staring at him with wide-eyed wonder. "Awesome," said the little girl. "It's the scouts. You see that symbol?" said the little boy. "They call it the Wings of Freedom." Aaron smiled at them softly, remembering back to the time when he was their age, and stared in wonderment and felt humbled by the presence of the soldiers of the scouting regiment. Now he was one of them and was now about to embark on his first expedition beyond the walls to face the Titans and prove his worth to humanity. Krista, Armin, Connie, Sasha, and Mina gripped the reins of their horses tightly, their hearts frantically pounding away as the adrenaline coursed through their veins. Jean, Reiner, Berthold, Amir and Mikasa looked calm as they sat on their horses waiting for the gate to open. "This is it, people. It's time to show those bastards once more what humanity is capable of. It's time for us to take one more step in pushing the Titans back into hell," declared one of scouts to a loud war cry from his fellow comrades. "Open the gate!" came a yell from in front. Even from where they were sitting, Ed and Alphonse could hear the loud rumbling of the large stone gate and the clanking of massive steel chains, ending on a loud boom of the gate reaching its end point. Commander Irwin, flanked by squad leaders Hang and Mike, stared into the long open path ahead of him. He stared into the lands currently occupied by the Titans, the lands which will one day be reclaimed by humanity. Forward. Check the description for the links to the author.